Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a roll call.
Mayor Hassler.
Here.
Alderman Smith. Alderwoman Johnson. Here. Alderman Donovan. Here. Alderman Jokers.
Here.
Alderman Eidman.
Here.
Alderman Rainey.
Here.
Alderman Prince.
Here.
Alderwoman Armbruster. Here. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Very good. Move for approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Takes us down to a personal appearance.
Victoria Daly with Sickage, formerly of Hochschild Bloom and Company, is here with the audit to give a rundown of it and answer any questions you may have of the audit. So, Victoria, we'll pass it on to you.
Come on.
All right. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the larger report that says financial report. And if you turn to the page with our letterhead, it says Independent Auditor's Report. And it's a report on the financial statements where we discuss management's responsibility, and we say management is responsible for the preparation and fair the modified cash basis of accounting. And then we discuss the auditor's responsibility. So our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. And our opinion is that the financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects. So that is what you want. That's good. That's a clean opinion. So now if you turn to page 4, that's where the management's discussion and analysis starts. And this is additional information that provides a good overview of what occurred in both the government-wide and the fund statements. So first we'll discuss the government-wide. The government-wide, starting on page 6, these are a long-term basis. These have your capital assets and the debt reported. On the fund statements, it doesn't have the capital assets or the debt. So looking at the government-wide, the total government ending that position is $19.7 million. It just decreased slightly, about $200,000 from last year. Total assets of $24 million, total liabilities of $4 million, leaves the ending $19 million. 13 of that is invested in your capital assets, like your streets, your equipment, vehicles, and then 1.5 million is restricted, and then 5 million is unrestricted as of the end of the year. Turning on to page 7, this shows the revenues and expenses in the government-wide statement. So you have your governmental activities and your business type activities. Your business type activities is your water and your sewer operations. So your total government includes both of those. So in comparison to last year, the charges for services decreased just slightly. Capital grants and contributions also decreased, mainly due to timing of when projects are completed. And then your property taxes and your sales taxes both increased. So your total revenues were about $5.5 million, and this decreased from 2019 by about $411,000. And your total expenses were $5.8 million in total, which increased about $700,000 from last year. And some of the reasons for the increase in the expenses is so the city sold land and building related to 5 Trotman Industrial, and the building wasn't fully depreciated, so that caused the culture and recreation expenses to increase. So it's the expenses you can see are $684,000 versus $200,000 last year. So that's where that loss is built in. And then the water expenses increased as well, and that was just due to there was a full year of hydrant flushing this year, So that caused those expenses to increase, leaving a change in that position of a decrease of $210,000. So you began the year with $19.9 million and ended the year at $19.7. And again, that's on the government-wide basis, which includes certain things that the funds don't. So I'll go over the funds in just a little bit. Then turning on to page 9 shows those capital assets that are reported on the government-wide basis. And the total government had $17 million of capital assets net of that accumulated depreciation versus $18.5 million last year. And that decrease was just due to the sale of the land and the building related to that property. Your long-term debt decreased due to just additional principal payments on the debt. So as of at the end of 19, you had $4.8 million of debt, and then as of the end of 2020, there was only $4.2 million. So it was a decrease of about $500,000. Now I'm going to turn to page 11. I'm sorry. We'll turn to page 13. So now I'm going to go into the governmental funds. So these are the funds that you're more probably used to. These are the funds that are budgeted. So you have the major funds, which are your larger funds, such as the general fund, transportation trust fund, and capital projects fund. And then all the smaller funds are grouped into other governmental funds. So as of the end of the year, the total fund balance was $4.8 million out of all those funds. There was $4.8 million of assets, mainly in cash and investments, $33,000 in liabilities, so that left $4.8 million in total fund balances. In the general fund, total fund balances was $1.7 million. So $1 million is unassigned, and then there was $627,000 that was assigned for subsequent year's budget. And what that just means is that in the 2021 budget, the budgeted expenditures exceeded revenue by $627,000. So in that case, then we have to assign that amount in the 2020 year-end statement, since the next year was over, the expenditures were over budgeted. So, I mean, it's assigned, but it's still being used for the general fund operation. And then on page 15 shows the revenues and expenditures and other financing sources and uses for those same funds. So the general fund had $2 million in revenue, $2 million in expenditures, but then in the other financing sources and uses, if you see sales capital assets, it has $655,000 due to that sale of the property. So on this basis, you see where that caused a positive net change in the general fund balance of $684,000, showing that revenue coming in from the sale of that property. So the general fund began the year with $1 million and ended it with $1.7 million of fund balance. The other funds, the transportation trust fund, decreased by $93,000, and that's just mainly due to an increase in capital outlay expenditures. The capital projects fund stayed pretty consistent to last year, and then the other governmental funds increased $176,000. Then turning on to page 17, so this shows kind of like the balance sheet for those proprietary funds, which is the business type activities, the water, and the sewer fund. So you see total cash and investments of $1.9 million, that total capital assets of about $10.5 million, leaving total assets of $12 million, total liabilities of $3 million, ending that position of $9 million. And $7 million of that is invested in capital assets, $21,000 is restricted for debt service, and $1.8 million is left unrestricted. On page 18, you can see the revenues and expenses for the water and sewer fund. So you see total charges for services of $2.2 million, operating expenses of about that same amount, $2.2 million, non-operating revenues and expenses, total non-operating expenses of $28,000, So that leaves a ending change in that position for the water fund, a decrease of $30,000, and the sewer fund an increase of $32,000. Those kind of offset. So your ending that position stays pretty consistent to the beginning that position. Now on page 20, this starts the notes to the financial statement. And I'll go over a couple of things. One thing, they stayed pretty consistent from last year, but there was one thing that we added related to the long-term debt. So on note D, starting on page 30, is where we implemented GASB 88. And GASB 88 has governments disclose any events of default that the debt disclosures contain, or if there's any collateral that's securing the debt. So we added a paragraph regarding the governmental activities, events of default, which the COPs, the certificates of participation, just contain a subjective acceleration clause that allows the lender to accelerate payment in the event of default. And the same with the business type activities, the water and sewer revenue bonds, they allow for penalties to be assessed in events of default, and they have that same subjective acceleration clause, and then they also have termination fees. So we're just required to disclose those. And then also on note E, the city's pension plan. So since the city is a modified cash basis, this doesn't actually get reported on the balance sheet and the income statement, the expense side, but I did want to know a little bit about the city's pension plan. So it's with loggers. There were 69 employees covered as of June 30, which is when the actuarial valuation is as of. And it's important to note that the city still has a net pension asset. So on page 35, you can see at the bottom of the page where it shows the city began with a net pension asset of $548,000 and ended with $236,000 of an asset. So it decreased slightly, mainly due to the market. In other cities as well, their loggers, if they had an asset, it decreased, or if they had a liability, it increased. But the city still has an asset as of the end of the year, so that's good. And then a change also to the notes was note K in subsequent events. So we noted just as a result of COVID-19, the ongoing spread continues to lead to economic uncertainty. The duration of these uncertainties and the ultimate effects cannot be reasonably estimated. And then we also disclosed how in August 2020, the city entered into a co-op agreement with the National Park Service to coordinate the transfer of the welcome centers to the service. So the transfer of the welcome center hasn't occurred yet, but it will occur eventually. And then on page 40 starts the supplemental information, and this details the budget to actual schedules for the funds. So I was going to go over just the major ones. So on page 41, it has the general fund, and you can see that the revenues were just slightly under budget by about $9,000, and then total expenditures were under budget as well by $241,000. And you can see the increase in fund balance of $684,000, and that's all on page 43. Then on page 44 is the Transportation Trust Fund. So revenues are slightly under budget by $54,000, and expenditures are also under budget by about $121,000. And then the fund is decreased by $93,000, mainly due to the increase in capital outlay from the prior year. So the Transportation Trust Fund ended the year with $637,000 in fund balance. Then on page 45 shows the Capital Projects Fund. And that fund, the revenues were actually over budget by $15,000, and then the expenditures were slightly under budget. That fund just slightly decreased, stayed pretty consistent, ended the year with $1.6 million. So that's what I was going to go over on the financial report. And then next, I'll go over the yellow book letter. So this, it's the letter that's on our letterhead that says Independent Auditor's Report on Internal Control over Financial Reporting and on Compliance and Other Matters. So this is also known as the yellow book letter. And this would require us to disclose if we found any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control. And it was important to note that we did not find any of that, so that's good. So that's what that letter kind of goes over. And then finally is our management letter. And so our management letter is a letter to management, and it goes over significant audit matters. So this year we disclosed how we adopted GASB 88, which is certain disclosures related to debt, and then any accounting estimates that we use. And so some of the accounting estimates were depreciation expense of its capital assets and the estimate related to the net pension assets. Any difficulties encountered while performing the audit, we didn't have any. And then we disclosed any corrected and uncorrected misstatements. So we say that management has corrected all such misstatements. And then we also provide a schedule of the adjusting journal entries that we gave them to put in the general ledger to adjust for any material differences. And management made all those. Any disagreements with management, so it says that we are pleased to report that no such disagreements arose. And then we go over any other audit findings or issues. And so we became aware of a certain comment from management, which just states that we noted the city prepared an accounting policies and procedures manual. However, we noted procedures and approval regarding water and sewer adjustments and wire transfers could be added to improve the quality of the manual. So that's the only comment that we noted for 2020. For 2019, we had 5 comments, and they were all implemented by the city, so that's very good. And that's kind of all that I have, unless anybody has any questions. And it was a lot to take in.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right. Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Happy, you're up with your report.
Didn't have anything new to report that's not on the report that I already sent out. Any questions about it?
Was there a revised one? We usually get a revised one.
No revised one. We were busy with,
I was making sure.
I was busy with / today, so
Right.
yeah, didn't have time to get you something extra.
You didn't make a motion to limit those, Joe? I think it's good.
Any questions? Moving on.
Very good, thank you. Chief?
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you all?
All right, you?
Well, I don't have a tremendous amount to report.
I did note in there, this May will be 2 years since we've had any turnover, knock on wood, so we wanted to make sure and give a shout out to everybody that supported our proposition. We really think that that was beneficial and is doing what we were hoping that it would do. So again, we appreciate your support and everybody that voted for that. So everybody seems happy. Everybody seems to be doing a pretty good job, and we survived the snow and didn't have too many incidents as far as traffic related. Usually we fare pretty well on that because there's nowhere that's terribly fast in town. So everybody stayed home and we're good, so we appreciate that. And
Our vehicles do good in snow?
yeah, when the new vehicles come in, we'll be down to just one sedan, but even those are all-wheel drive. But the SUVs give us a little bit, especially with an 8-inch, 9-inch snow. You know, all-wheel drive doesn't do a whole lot. Just it's like a snow plow. So we tried to help Gary out some with that. But anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Chief. Toby?
All right, you have my written report. Not too much to add to that. The photo display for the bicentennial that we were going to have this month ended up not making it due to the weather, and they're going to come back in July from the 15th to the 27th. They'll be on display at the Welcome Center. And then the Jefferson National Parks Association did come in and put in some new racks for merchandise this week, so we now have available at the Welcome Center these hoodies, in addition to t-shirts and long sleeve shirts that have the matching logo on those. So I think these are $35.95. I think the shirts are a little less expensive than that, but pretty slick looking items. I have some print materials to give to you. First of all, and these are things I know I showed you previous copies before they were printed out. So we have our rack cards that will be available at racks throughout the state and hotels and such. So people who are getting ready to make a visit to town will see these on the way to kind of help them make their decision. And then when they do get to town, we have the maps that I showed you guys previously. These are the final versions on the slick paper and paper quality. I meant to point that out last time when I had the paper ones, that those were not the final versions of them. So, but anyway, these are them, and they're out already at some points around the county, and the rack cards will be distributed by the company throughout the state.
Yes,
Much of my report includes a list of events, and that's so that make sure Gary's paying attention, because you asked me about the events taking place this year. And so what we know so far is on this list. There's obviously a lot of things up in the air in terms of what could still take place and what could be canceled or what can still be scheduled, but we're shaping up to have quite a few events in town and hopefully have a good year once spring rolls around, get some people vaccinated and ready to travel, and hopefully we'll have a good year ahead. I believe there are some items on the agenda that were discussed as being tabled with regard to tour contracts. I think Gary probably talked to Bob Mueller, and I know I talked to Bob a bit this week about some of the concerns he had with those contracts, and we're going to revisit those, make sure that any differences between those contracts are reconciled with what Viking expects from us and what our partners here expect from us. The contract we'll do with French Colonial America is kind of going to be a basis with our other partners in town in terms of the expectations of what we can provide them when we have tours coming through.
Toby, I'm sorry, just
yeah.
to clarify, you're recommending we table those
Yes,
this evening?
yes,
Okay, thank
yeah.
you.
And then Happy sat in with me on one of the national park meetings last week. They had 2 day-long meetings where they talked about their mission statement for the most part and the significant statements that support their mission. A very interesting process where they spend a lot of time discussing even different words that we've come to use over time as kind of what St. Genevieve is about, and kind of revisiting those words and what kind of meanings they have and how they're interpreted. And so it's very interesting to see the thought process that's going to lead to what their focus is and how they interpret things. Are there any questions?
I do want to point out that the slogan that's on here was developed by Toby after a number of ideas that we shot back and forth and shot down mostly. They were bad.
These look good, and I think you've done a great job in getting us all moving forward.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Steve?
Evening, everyone. During the month of January, well number 4 down in our well field, electric motor failed on that during startup one morning. Contacted Flynn Drilling. It was less than 6 or 7 months old. They came down, pulled the motor, found the motor had failed. That motor was replaced the following morning under a warranty repair. So later in the month, it's actually not in my report, but Flynn Drilling came down and did a full inspection of all 4 wells. It's the annual inspection. Noticed that showed that the screens on the wells were starting to get fouled, and they were in need of cleaning. One of them was pretty low, well number 3. So we've shut that one down, turned on the other well. We have a backup well. So we're still producing the same amount of water, no issues there. But the wells are needing to be cleaned, and I have that out for bid in the paper this week. So other than that, lots of winterizing our facilities, full round of cleanup at all facilities. Painting continues inside the water plant. That has to be done during the winter months when we don't have the condensation on the tanks. So we're going to paint in there until first round of condensation shows up, and that'll be it for until the end of summer. So let's see. Tried to have a couple meetings with a property owner on Riverview about discharging rags to the sewer system. They were mailed a letter. We made a couple attempts, whether the snow prohibited that here recently. We're going to try and get another meeting set up next week, come up with a resolution and see if we can either stop the debris from being discharged to the sewer system or some kind of mechanical unit on their property that they maintain. So
We had this discussion before, haven't we?
we've had it numerous times.
Yeah. Because I know that was talked about before, is them coming up with something mechanical, and
The owner was under the impression that that work had already been completed under different management at the facility. It turns out he was unaware that it had not been completed.
it just causes havoc down in the neighborhood down there, the sewer,
Yeah,
man.
so,
That's got to get rectified. It's just went on long enough.
yeah. So, other than that, numerous items of routine maintenance around the facilities.
Any water main breaks or anything during the real cold weather?
We had a few on the real cold days, of course. There was a nice lady in Rozier subdivision that brought us some hot chocolates, but we appreciate her. We still don't know who she is. She handed them off and ran.
Oh,
So,
yeah?
so whoever you are, thank you. So,
Nice. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
all right,
Steve.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is the COVID discussion. I haven't saw the numbers. Sometimes usually is where I get them. How are they doing, or?
Our active cases were in the single digits.
Really?
The last few reports I saw.
That's great. That's great.
They did report 2 new deaths this
Right.
week, but those were the first in a while.
Yeah.
The active cases are pretty down.
I think nationwide the numbers are coming down, so I think it'll get better as more people get vaccinated, and a lot of people had COVID and they got some protection, so.
Well, it's starting to warm up now, so we'll see if that changes from
Yeah.
the weather.
Yeah, but you know, if you get on some of the apps and stuff and see, I mean, our county compared to a lot of the other counties around, I mean, per capita, we're in a lot better shape.
Yeah. Super. Any committee reports?
I'll touch on park board real quick. We had our meeting for the... What are you laughing at? You make this go longer just by laughing.
I'm sure he's got some from planning and zoning.
Lengthy.
So the committees within the park board are still meeting and reporting, so not a whole lot new to report there. But we did have William Zugig come and give us a presentation on Monday. He's interested in bringing cycling back to St. Genevieve. And so he had a lot of ideas that he presented to the park board to see if they could kind of just help back him on that. And everything he presented sounded great, so we'll see where that moves in the future.
As in competitive cycling?
Yeah. I guess it was about a decade ago we had the tour in Missouri or whatever. He wants to see something like that coming back in. Apparently there's a hill on M Road that all the cyclists love to hate. And so he and some buddies have had conversations amongst themselves of how great St. Genevieve would be. And he kind of gave us the breakdown of how these events happen. And typically they're a whole weekend event, and they have a couple different types of events, the long road race paired with some
smaller time trials or the races. So he presented with several options and got initial support from the board. That there wasn't anything to necessarily vote on, but he's gonna talk with his people and see if they can get something like that moved forward in the next year or two. So, and then aside from that, we had Sean Long from the library meet with us, and the museum downtown, the Learning Center and the library are partnering for a Jurassic Park in the Park event in May, and they want to, of course, have that at the soccer fields in the park where they show a movie and have some events going on, so all good stuff.
Yeah.
So healthcare committee met, had a couple of meetings. Looks like we're going to stay with Lakeland Insurance and let them bring some information to us. We had a representative from SONUS, who is the healthcare connection through Lakeland for the healthcare that we offer the city employees. So they're supposed to come back and give us a breakdown of the plans that are out there and start that process. We just think it's better at this point to stay with Lakeland and not really switch up to any other companies at this point. And then the sewer water committee met. We're getting ready to go out for probably an RFQ. I've got one more committee member to talk to. We want to get that submitted, get it out there, probably get it submitted next month, work our way towards getting a contract by August so they can start October 1. We've decided that an RFQ, a qualifications-based review, is better than going with a request for proposals where you're just looking for bottom line, because our system is in good shape now. Let's keep it in good shape and find a company or stay with the same company that can provide the best service. So that's where we are in those committees.
One other thing, happy stuff we did find out, we had talked about changing on the health care, of changing to our budget year. We did find out we cannot change that. June 1 is set in stone.
It's the way the insurance group that we go through is for small businesses, but it's a small businesses that's a large business, it's a large group, and they have a set time. So they manage themselves that way. So what we have is what we have, and we just have to work around it. But I think everybody was, a lot more, it was a good information session. Everybody felt comfortable staying with that same insurance policies, same insurance group.
Okay. Is there anybody here for public comments? Okay. There's no public comments. We'll look at the approval of consent agenda. Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Takes us to old business. Bill number 4414, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a 3-year contract for provision of cemetery lawn mowing and maintenance services with K&J Landscaping of St. Genevieve, Missouri, in the amount not to exceed $50,400 over 3 years, and amending the cemetery fund number 27, line item 7065, contract labor. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, and I apologize, I wasn't here for the last meeting and stuff, but why did we have to go to 3 years with that?
Usually you do a contract out a few years so that if they have to buy equipment or prepare, you can break that down into a 3-year period, and it's actually cheaper to do it that way instead of saying, here, do it for a year, good luck. You're going to get a higher price that way.
What is the city's option for getting out of that? Like, if
There's a performance clause in there.
Well, but strictly performance, something changes and...
one thing I don't remember talking about is, the summer help. I know this past summer we haven't had, I don't think we had any summer help hired. Does that change anything for our ability to mow it in-house?
Turnout usually is, I think, paid through parks. So you're looking at supplementing that group more than the cemetery. It's just taking time away from doing our other maintenance work.
How long does it, what are the hours spent on mowing at the cemeteries
About a day and a half a week for everybody.
for everybody? How many guys do that?
Well, I say everybody, usually 5 people out here.
I don't have any concerns with this company, even though I know they had done it in the past. And looking at the numbers, I mean, it's definitely a huge increase in that contract to what it was years ago, but I'm concerned over the 3 years more than anything. But I know, Happy, you talked about the equipment, but I mean, you can't depreciate equipment for 3 years. I'm not sure what you were...
It's the investment that somebody has to put into it. If you break it out into 3 years, it usually comes out less than just saying do it for a year. And you're likely to get more contractors. We didn't in this case, but you're likely to get more contractors that would want to make the investment instead of just trying to shoot for a year where they wouldn't be able to afford to do that. They don't have that ability to charge over those 3 years. And we also have included in there's an option for 2 one-year extensions onto that as well. But they chose not to accept that when they submitted their bid.
Personally, I would rather see a 1-year contract with those 2 options, but that's just my opinion. And is this a budget amendment amount?
No, we already did the budget. Well, the budget amendment's included with this. But we went through the bid process, the bid part of it. Everybody approved that. Now we're reading this for the second time.
Right.
So we've had 3 discussions on it, and that's why we're at this point, yeah.
Any more discussion?
Move approval. Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Alderwoman Johnson?
Yes.
Alderman Donovan?
You know, I'm going to abstain. I'm not going to vote yes or vote no because I don't have any things against this company or anything, but I just have reserves with the 3 years.
Is that a reason you abstain?
You can abstain.
Okay. Alderman Jokers?
Yes.
Alderman Eidman?
Yes.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes.
Alderman Prince?
Yes.
Alderwoman Armbruster? No. Let's see, 5 yes, 1 no, 1 absent, 1 abstaining. Bill number 4414 now becomes ordinance 4337.
Thank you. We're going to table the next 2.
Motion to table then bill number 4415 and 4416.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Takes us to bill number 4418, the second reading an ordinance of the Board of Aldermen authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Bader Land Surveying to survey a section of levee property for future conveyance.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a roll call, please.
Alderwoman Armbruster?
Yes.
Alderman Prince?
Yes.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes.
Alderman Eidman?
Yes.
Alderman Jokers?
Yes.
Alderman Donovan?
Yes.
Alderwoman Johnson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no's, 1 absent. Bill number 4418 now becomes ordinance 4338.
Thank you. I have under new business discussion of turnout gear bid with Fire Chief Steiger.
So the fire chief is with his wife tonight, and they are, I think, anniversary or something, so I'm filling in for the chief.
Hi, Chief.
Thank you. I'm saving Gary this week. So we went out for bids on turnout gear. It came in over budget. Our feeling is that we reject this bid, and we'll try a different source to see if we can find the type of equipment that we need. This actually also didn't fit exactly what we have, so we'd like to keep it consistent, so we're going to research it again And we'd like to, again, reject this bid that came in.
How many bids did we get?
One.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah.
Or I'll make a motion to reject the bid for
Second.
turnout gear.
Have a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
This takes us to the first reading of Bill Number 4420, an ordinance of the City of St. Genevieve, Missouri, deleting Article 3, Safety Committee, Section 120.040, and Article 4, Information Systems Usage Policy, Sections 120.050 of the Municipal Code of Ordinances.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Is there any other business? Or if there's no other business, we'll adjourn this meeting. In a few minutes, we'll have a work session.
Boom, boom. All right.
Yeah.
I'm here all week. So the board talked about extending UTV permits to 2 years. That was the initial discussion, and then we branched off into some other areas. I emailed everybody, and you should have a copy of the amended ordinance. So this is pulled from our code book, and then we did it in Word form. So Mark and I have made changes. So my stuff's in the red. Mark's stuff is in the blue, purplish color. So he perfected it. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted added, or if you had any questions about it before we brought it to you as an ordinance. We would completely delete the sections as they are and then insert these sections, because this is the complete ordinance. Also included some waiver of liabilities for the golf cart and for the UTVs. That was developed by Mark Bishop, so we'll include that as a requirement. We will accept county permits. They don't have to have a city permit if they have a county permit. It is in here, you can do that. It is two.
We'll still have our own.
Right. So if they don't have a county permit and there's no city permit on it, then they're in trouble. They should be getting a city permit.
One or the other.
Does the waiver of liability then, if they're not getting a UTV permit, is that a concern that we won't have a waiver?
So the county gets a waiver themselves.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was something that they had already included in their permit application. Does that cover us? We didn't discuss that.
Okay.
Well, you're still in the county, even if you're in a city.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it won't list the city as, as an additional. I might ask the county if they would include that. But they talk about St. Genevieve County, Missouri. But they also talk about the county commission. So we can maybe see if they would add also the city of St. Genevieve where applicable or something like that. I'll send that to the county commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
So with this, is there no exclusion for farm vehicles?
So when farm vehicles, agricultural vehicles are already exempt. I think there is a section in there that talks about agricultural vehicles, I believe.
Well, that's what the state of Missouri says.
Yeah.
Vehicles operated for agricultural purposes or industrial on premises purposes between official sunrise and sunset of the day of operation, that's an exemption. So that's in there. That's on where it's section 340-250, operation of UTVs. So that's I believe that's state statute. That's not changing at all. That's as is.
We gotta have a farm. Right?
Doesn't say you have to own it, just says for agricultural purposes. So whether
Yeah.
you're-
That's what mine's for.
mine too. But because when you go to the state, they have size limitations on them that don't make any sense. If it's of a bigger vehicle, then they have to be titled and considered different. But if they're, and it even takes into consideration the weight. I don't remember what it was. I think it was 2,500 pounds. But
I know that's what's enabled. That's the enabling legislation. Oops. No big deal.
That's that one thing.
It goes to City Hall.
So yeah, we really can't change that.
all right. And we are still keeping golf carts as electric only.
Whatever we had before, that's the same thing we had
Electric
now.
only was for rentals.
Oh, it was?
That's only included in the part if you're gonna operate a rental business. Gas are allowed.
Oh,
I've read it a couple times. When I was considering getting my dad. I was a little confused.
Anything else? Okay, we just got that one thing we'll try to get added, and then we'll move forward with that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to some zoning changes. What we're doing is bringing this to the board before we send it through the process of going to planning and zoning, and then coming back to the board, and then you're rejecting it. Figure we'll get the, see what you think about it up front. P&Z will still have their opinion, their option to say no to something you would even say yes to. So, but we thought it'd be good to start the discussion with the board.
So over the past year, we've had some discussion regarding these issues, taking that discussion, some citizen input, and some research into consideration. I just wanted to make some suggestions to you. Again, just to reiterate what Happy said, this is just a first step, only suggestions. Just wanted to get your feel. I would have to take the zoning related ones to P&Z and then come back to you with any recommendations. The first one is for mobile home replacements. If you remember during our most recent special use permit discussion, the age of the replacement came up. Since these are non-conforming issues, we can't legislate that out of existence, but we can certainly strengthen the stipulations for replacements. Non-conforming mobile home replacement is mentioned in 2 places in municipal code. I sent you those possible changes. It basically changes the term newer or improved mobile home to mobile home manufactured no more than 10 years prior to application for replacement. So it would still allow the owners to replace them. It would just make them newer. And as we've discussed before, older mobile homes have some unsafe and unsecure conditions, and many of the older ones aren't created to last more really than 20 or 25 years. Limiting replacements to 10 years would certainly help provide safer structures for our citizens and the city. Any comments or concerns, or would you like to move forward with that?
Was there anything in particular that led you to that 10-year cap? Just kind of.
I thought about 5-year.
Yeah.
But 10-year, you know, I don't want to make it a burden on the owner either.
Right.
This is their right to use their property. 10-year, again, most trailers and mobile homes manufactured today are meant to last 30 to 55 years. So 10 years puts it almost nearly into half of that 30 years.
Okay, yeah.
You know, at least there's another 25 years in that unit.
Got it.
And when was those standards made by the government, or what they were required to?
HUD put standards in place for mobile homes in 1976. But mobile homes manufactured in the 80s and even some into the 90s, you know, they still had some aluminum wiring, some still had butylene pipes that cracked. They really didn't get, you know, even though those standards were put in place in 76, most of the mobile homes that are manufactured today, you know, those standards were improved upon. For the last 25 years, I'd say, 1995, 2000, those are really meant to last as long as they're maintained. Let's face it, a lot of the problems are maintenance problems. They're not properly cared for. If there's foundation issues, leaks in trailers are a huge issue compared to homes that are on standard foundations. So maintenance is a huge issue. But the 10 years came from kind of that calculation.
I think it matters where they're manufactured too, doesn't it? Like if they're manufactured in a warm climate and they're going to be used in a warm climate, I think there's some difference in
they're manufactured.
There's
Different manufacturing specs for high wind zones and very humid zones. We're not that here,
right?
So we don't really deal with that. But
so
yeah,
we don't worry about that. No. Okay.
Any other concerns or positive feelings about that, or?
I think it would be good to have a more specific number instead of just newer.
Are you?
That's open to newer is open to interpretation. So I like saying within 10 years of application. Is that correct?
Yeah. Originally I had replacement there, but Hattie made a good point. We need to have a solid date. So if we put application for replacement, the day they turn in the application, the clock starts. I guess it doesn't start. It ended 10 years prior to that.
Okay.
So, you know, being over at the trailer park that recently got the special use permit, I foresee more of these applications coming to you. And so this would put the replacements at, 2010 or newer, 2021 or 2011, something of that nature. It just would be better for the park, better for the city, better for the tenants.
Yeah.
I like the 10 years, but it could also, if it goes to planning and zoning and they say, well, let's do 12, they could make that recommendation, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if you're also and stuff, that way it's constantly updating every year instead of a
Yes.
set date, and then you have to go back and change it.
1984.
Yeah. Newer.
Okay. I will certainly move forward with that one unless anybody has anything else. Nope. Sign ordinance is a little different with regards to our sign ordinance. There's a few issues. One, I think I mentioned in the information I sent to you that the Supreme Court came out with a ruling in 2016, which kind of happened after most of the ordinance occurred, that you can't have content-related regulations. So if you walk up to a sign and you read it and determine that something's wrong with it, you're already violating the law. It has to be revolved around time, place, or manner, so the kind of sign. So we have a few mentions of content or subject-related material in our code. There is a stipulation in Missouri code that you cannot not allow real estate signs, and that what I'm suggesting is fine. They're still allowed. We've also received complaints lately. I wrote down 7 over the past 4 months. 6 of those were on one particular issue, and 1 was on a separate issue. And those really related to the number of signs and the length that they were in place. Okay, this has nothing to do with subject matter. So I would ask, we don't talk about or it be relayed in the public as anything associated with politics or subject matter whatsoever. It's all about the number of signs, the placement of signs, and how long they're allowed to be in place. And what I'm really referring to is temporary signs in that nature. And then our code currently does not exempt temporary signs from the permitting process. Now, of course, we don't permit them. In other words, people don't have to come in to get a temporary sign in their yard, but our code doesn't exempt that, and I'd like to fix these things so that temporary signs are exempt from permitting as long as they match the definition that I'm suggesting we put in place. That would match up with most other local municipalities. I looked at a few, Perryville, Farmington, and then I looked at a few other examples just out in the hemisphere, Smithville, and I looked at a couple of bigger cities that really have a lot of restrictions on how long you can put them in place and where you can put them. I stuck to the basics here. So what I'm really proposing is three things. Eliminate the content-related references in our code. So there's a reference to real estate signs, there's a reference to garage and yard sale signs, and actually there's a definition for a construction sign that I would suggest we take out too, because a construction sign, in other words, you get a roof put on, the guy puts a sign in your yard. I mean, it's a temporary sign. There's no need to reference the type or the material or the subject matter. Redefine temporary signs and banners. So banner is a temporary sign, so it just changes one word in that definition. And then add temporary signs to the list of exemptions. And then within that definition or that exemption, give some specifics on the amount or the manner, I guess, that you could put those signs in place. So on this page, which I did send to each of you, there were 5 suggestions. One is redefine temporary sign, and if you read through that, it takes all of the reference to any sort of type of sign, or subject matter type. It basically says, it's made of cardboard or coroplast or plastic, it's not on a foundation, and it's not in a permanent structure. We would change that definition, and then we would change the definition of banner to the exact same definition, just include the word temporary. And then the change that, I'm certainly open to any feedback on, well, any of them, but this one being the most, is changing 405-205 I1G. It's at the bottom of that first page that I sent. It would take temporary real estate signs out of the exemption and just created an exemption for all temporary signs. But it says display of these signs shall be limited to no more than 18 square feet in gross surface area in residential zones and 64 square feet in gross surface area in all other zones. These signs shall not be displayed in excess of 60 consecutive days, nor any more than 120 days in a total calendar year. That could be a rolling calendar year also. So in other words, 18 square feet, in case you're wondering where I came up with that, again, I looked at a bunch of other municipalities. Some had 12, some had 15, some had 24. It was kind of in that range. If you have a standard 24-inch to 18-inch political sign in your yard, that's 3 square feet. So to have 18 square feet, you can have 6 signs in your yard and still be well within the restrictions. So if you want a governor's sign and a president's sign, an attorney general sign, and a Bob Donovan sign, a Paul Hassler sign, you can have all that in your yard and still not violate any restrictions. And then the 64 square feet, so that would be in commercial and industrial zones. That gives them the ability to put larger 8x4 signs up. And really, if you're a resident and you want to put a 4x4 sign up, which there were some up this past election, you can still put 2 of those in your yard. So you have a lot of leeway there. 60 days leading up to the election. Now, this board can certainly tell me otherwise, but I don't plan to go around and calculate square footage and write down the day people put signs up. It would be basically how we do nuisances. If someone calls, then I would go out. I don't want to be the sign police whatsoever. Questions, comments, concerns?
So this is only on your property, but if you put a sign on someone else's property, then these still apply?
Well, I mean, signs to the property. So if you put a sign on your property because you're having a yard sale, and then you put one on Buck's property, that's his responsibility.
Toby?
Dave, what about the content of the sign? You got the limitation of 120 days. What if my sign one day says blue for 60 days? I pull that down, 2 days later I put a sign that says red, and I keep doing that. Am I capped at 120 days, or can I do 260 days? Or?
You're capped, according to this, you'd be capped at 120 days in a calendar year. And yes, so you could do that. If you wanted to put your Toby Carrig for Senate sign, you put it in, 4 months in advance, and then you take it out, for a day and put it back. I don't plan to police that, but if someone had, 20 signs in the yard and that aggravated a neighbor, they could give us a call.
But if they rotate 5 signs, how are you going to? So I've got a sign for a yard sale, I stick out there for 2 months, and I pull it up. And I stick a candidate sign for 2 months, and I pull it up. And I have to put a sign because my kids go into school for 2 or 3 months. That's what
I'm not going to police that, but if a neighbor complains, I'm going to come out there and snap a picture, write down the date. I can't be there every second. And really, I don't mean not to address you, but really the point here is for us to have some control over those folks who are taking this to the extreme. And there's only a few of them. We all know that this happens with nuisances also. There's only a few who violate, but this would give us a little more ability to go to those folks and say, listen, you're well over these. Does that kind of answer your question?
So I have a limit of period of time for, say, a year. I can have a sign for 120 days, regardless of what the sign is, or if it's various different signs rotated in. I can only have a sign out there for that many days of the year.
Because if you go out there on day 1 and it's a Senate sign, and then you go 119 days later and they change the sign, does the count restart? Or is
That's what it sounds like, yeah. My understanding would be that content's not considered and that the clock starts again with each change.
With each
right,
sign.
it's 18 square feet of gross surface area. So if you have 6 signs, even though you have 6 there one day and 6 there the next day, they're different signs, it's still in the same amount of surface area.
But is it the same count of days?
Yes.
So, what about I don't know if Zero does, but I know the Cafe Genevieve has their menu out on a little sign every day.
That's a sidewalk, there's
That's right
stipulations.
in the middle of the parking lot, I mean.
Right.
There's
Still a sign.
Equal sign where they write the today's specials on.
But they take it in at night, don't they?
Yeah, they take it every night.
So clock
So
restarts,
displaying
right?
us, okay, so
Really,
that doesn't, okay.
really the timeline wouldn't even be that enforceable, because the day you go out and tell them, they take it in for a night and then come back out, right? And it's all good. So the time aspect of this wouldn't be.
Well, if you have it on display, we can certainly get into the weeds. I was trying not to, but if you have,
yeah.
you know,
I wasn't necessarily trying to get into the weeds, it was just Toby brought it up.
Well, I
so
mean,
wanted to-
my complaint is if we're gonna limit to 120 days, restaurants can only put out for 120 days their menu? Or, I know our city attorney has a sidewalk.
well, what kind of sign are they putting out? Is this a sign on a stand? This is like a lot of the
Temporary.
restaurants downtown put out an A-frame sign on their sidewalk.
Yeah.
That is not this sign.
Okay,
that's all.
okay.
You're talking about something that's staked in the ground.
Yeah, puts,
Or taped to your house.
Oh, okay.
Or taped to the tree in front of your house. Or
And made of a specific
Made of
temporary material.
coroplast or cardboard. This isn't a chalkboard or a painted sign on a piece of wood that has, you know, hinges on it. This is, cardboard, vinyl, coroplast, plastic, placed either on the ground, on a pole, without a footing, or on a building, with rope, string, tacks, screws. I mean, there's some subjectivity here, but there's subjectivity already.
yeah, I think so.
And, Toby and Ashley's points are well taken. Again, I don't plan to go around and count the days or
Only if we get a complaint.
ask the chief to stay there and make sure they don't take it out of the ground.
Yeah, I mean,
You can do that, right?
I don't foresee it being that big of an issue, but, there's always the one person
Sure.
that, or, the disgruntled neighbors that will, that sign's been there 119 days and a half.
That'll be going tomorrow night.
Yeah, and then, so the neighbor takes it in for a night and puts it back out.
And if it comes down to one or two issues like that, I think, most of those issues, even nuisance related, are resolved with just a conversation or a letter.
So we can let P and Z do a little discussion on this.
Yeah, that'd be good for Joe.
Yeah.
Super Joe.
Joe, it sounds like you might have a long meeting.
Yeah.
More than 5
You
minutes.
may have some
don't mind that.
definitely input the next meeting
Yeah.
to discuss in detail.
Yeah.
Be sure to encourage the public to show up and voice their opinion.
Jerry will move it along.
So feel free to take that on to P and Z.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
Sounds good.
The last one, definitely a little more subjective. We've had discussions around this table or at the podium about nuisance ordinance and trying to better define that, and there's really not a objective definition of a nuisance. What I've been using, what we currently have involves terms like unreasonably annoying. Well, that's a different meaning to every person around town. But that invokes the term to the public, so unreasonably annoying to the public, unreasonably noisy, or something of that nature. So what I've looked for over the course of a few months are different terms that could be put there that would maybe help us to accomplish some of the things that some of you have come to me about possible nuisances, because when I'm out there now, I'm looking for things that hold water, or things that have very sharp edges, things that could be appealing to children to climb on, even though they're not supposed to. Things that could breed insects or rats or things of that nature. So not every eyesore falls under one of those descriptions. But you can't put eyesore in it. Well, we could, but I prefer not to. So there were a few other cities out there that had terms like Nuisance creates a fire hazard. Nuisance negatively impacts the character or stability of the surrounding area. Nuisance negatively impacts the taxable value of land and building.
Yes.
Nuisance interferes with another person's reasonable use and enjoyment of life or property.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's the one I stuck in there. It's not any more or less subjective than what is there, but I would say that it changes, what we've been going with, what I've been doing. It says, unreasonably injurious, dangerous, annoying, unsafe, or offensive to the public. This adds, or interferes with another person's reasonable use and enjoyment of life or property. It certainly opens up another avenue, but that doesn't mean that it's going to solve every problem. I don't think that if someone has, let's just use some way out there examples. If someone has rabbit cages all around their house, that may annoy someone, but I don't know that that's a nuisance. I don't know that that still would fit here. I don't think that's a nuisance, and this board can certainly tell me otherwise.
Not clean.
Right.
The stench.
Correct, if they're not cleaned and they're stench, but just having them there. Or someone uses pieces of wood for their landscaping instead of blocks or scallops or whatever. Again, that could bother someone and has, but I don't find that to be a nuisance. Whereas, to me, this description would help. There might be someone out there who has 3 or 4 used lawnmowers sitting in their yard, and I don't think that fits the breeds vector or vermin, has sharp edges, holds water. It doesn't fit any of those, but if they're not using them, and if they're just sitting there, maybe this would help with that. Just to reiterate, the mobile home ordinance I ran by Mark, and he said that would work. These other 2, I still need to run by him after we go through planning and zoning in this process. So I'm not sure this is enforceable, for lack of a better term, but I would go to him if that's something you wanted to pursue. Now, the second one there, that when I sent you this document, not this one, but the second one, I do believe that's definitely worth adding. It describes in our nuisance ordinance an accumulation or deposit of vehicular or equipment parts, appliances, junk, or material. And it goes on, where such accumulation or deposit may constitute an attractive nuisance, danger to children, be a breeding ground, and then I added, or be a fire hazard or impediment to firefighters. So I think anything that fits that description would certainly be a nuisance. Questions, comments, concerns?
But this doesn't eliminate the requirements we have on vehicles that they be licensed and insured.
And it in no way changes that. That's a whole separate section of nuisance ordinance. These are just general nuisances, so it doesn't have anything to do with noise ordinance, noise nuisances, vehicles, weeds and vegetation. This is just that other category.
Catch-all category.
You could use it. A strong.
You're cracking on it.
Yeah.
Planning and zoning.
Well, this is nuisance, so this would not go to planning and zoning.
Okay, yeah.
But I wanted to kind of feel you out because, well, one, I wanted to talk about it tonight and to see if we get any feedback. I've certainly run it by a few other people, but to see what your feelings and thoughts were.
I think it's good. I think it really does improve the language, and I can think of a couple complaints that I've heard that if this had been part of it, it could have clearly said, yep, that's a nuisance. So I like both of those changes. I think we should go forward.
One concern I have is that it may open up an avenue for more complaints, but I still think we have other parts of the definition that it would have to meet. So if someone does call and complain that, so-and-so doesn't sweep their porch, I would still have the ability to tell them, well, that's not a nuisance, unfortunately.
So there's no putting any numbers in here, like if you had X number of complaints, that would be a little more restricted.
To me, that opens up a huge Pandora's box. So if you get enough of your neighbors to call me and complain about the fact that Buck has, a fountain in his yard because you don't like the fountain, well, that's not a nuisance.
Well, the fountain isn't, but some other things are.
I'm not picking on you, Buck.
I got critters underneath the ground.
Yeah.
That's
There's
a
always
nuisance.
excavating up there. I don't know what's going on.
It's a nuisance, big time. We'll get the money.
Yeah, I would love to have an objective definition of a nuisance, but I would tell you between other municipalities, Missouri Municipal League, conversations with folks like Happy who've been in this job a while, there is no objective definition of a nuisance.
Well, it's still up to the judge, even if it's up to court, it's still up to the judge to make a final decision on it, so.
All right. Good, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Happy.
Good job.
All right, finally tonight, just wanted to pass along to you this information that we received from the Industrial Development Corporation of the Chamber of Commerce. This is on housing. It was done by the Regional Planning Commission out of Perryville, which is our regional planning commission that we belong to. So some interesting things about housing. What they put together was kind of, didn't really show the exact need, but we kind of discussed, does it show that there's a need for somebody to
Sorry.
enter? No, that's good.
Distracting.
Yep. Thank you. So whether there is a need for housing and what the impact would be on the economy for both us and St. Genevieve County. So on the first page, one of the things that shows that we need housing that we've kind of grasp at, if you look at percent of vacant, so that's the fourth line down, St. Genevieve has only 5.5% of the latest survey that was done in St. Genevieve is vacant. So Bloomsdale's lower, which is probably an anomaly. But if you look at the other cities, they're double digits. So it shows you that there isn't a lot of vacancies here, which usually you have it in the 10 to 15% range, and that's the turnover of houses and people that are wanting to buy a house, or that the houses are available. We're showing that people are in their house and they're not moving. There's just nothing open there. So that was kind of interesting.
So is that just single families?
That's just housing units. No, that's everything. That's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's apartments and houses. And then there it gets into the prices and what the housing valuations are. And again, that's just some numbers you can look at to compare with the other cities. The other major thing to look at would be, and what they did was they projected this out. So if you go to, it looks like this, it's 2025 projections. And that's for renter occupied, and then the one right before that talks about homeowner. I'm sorry, I was wrong.
What did it look like?
Yeah, if you go to the page right before that, it says, it'll look for 2025 projections based on primarily owner occupied and primarily renter occupied. So we've talked about new individual single-family home dwellings. So if you look at the comparison between the two, you'll see the advantage to having single-family homes as opposed to just a number of apartment complexes, and the amount of money that can be generated by these single-family dwellings. And this is why we're looking for more housing. So just bottom lining on both of these, and again, you can go through them and look at all the individual numbers. If you by 2025, if a housing development had moved in covering 47 acres, this is based on a projection, a potential, let's say, you're looking at an annual sales tax revenue of about $205,000 for the county and $137,000 for the city if it's owner. If it was renter occupied, it's $146,000 or $97,000 for the city. But it just kind of gives you an idea. If a subdivision probably isn't going to build out in 5 years, or 4 years if they started this year. There's no way. Building out that quickly is difficult. But by the end of the lifetime of a subdivision, this is what you would get. If you look at Valley Springs, I think it's like 30 years that it's been building out.
Yeah.
You can't expect it that quickly. But I mean, these numbers kind of reflect on the previous pages as well, because they've kind of taken every year and they've taken the full amount of development. That's not what's going to happen, but this kind of gives you an idea of the advantages to putting in housing in St. Genevieve, why we need it, because it would increase our sales tax. And then there's also a chart in there of if you build out, what the cost would be for the developer. I think when we looked at it, we kind of have some problems with some of the figures that they put in there. But you're looking at development costs of about $2 million. And then what the lots would cost themselves, what the cost of building a home. The cost of building a home didn't seem to be accurate. We kind of think they were too low on what the cost was per square foot. But it kind of gives you an idea of what the amount of money that will be spent if you would put in a subdivision. So I'm simplifying it, just running over some of the highlights. If you want details on it, I can have Drew from the Regional Planning Commission come in and talk about it, but it does talk about the importance of housing. Now, this is owner occupied, so there's also a need for workforce housing, for affordable housing. What we hope is that you would also have the opportunity that people would buy new homes, open up some of these homes that would be lower priced, but you also probably need to look at you probably also need to also think about if something where you have other housing that's affordable housing for like we have at Robinwood and places like that. That's also something to think about. There's a need for housing.
Well, we've got 14 families on that wait list.
There you go.
And to think about each end of the spectrum, I mean, we need to think about each end, not just the higher end of the spectrum, somehow.
And there's a need for senior housing. That's been proven. A number of MHDC grants that go out, people apply for that. Multiple people apply for those grants. And they're difficult to come by, but that's because there's a lot of seniors that are on waiting lists to get into places. So, any questions about this, or you've got it in digital form, you got it in paper form, so sit and look at it. Got any questions, let me know.
Based on your past experience, or the network that you have, people you can reach out to, like, as we court a developer, what's in it for a developer if we said, hey, we're looking for the magic number of 50 in the magic price range of $250,000 for the starter home. That makes you throw open your mouth a little bit when you say it, but what's in it for them? Would we ever be able to incentivize them to say, along with that, we need some low-income housing? Can you develop that? Are there government grants that make that a win for the developer? I mean, I imagine it's a loser for the developer. Like, they're not going to want, there's no incentive for them to do that, but how do we find that incentive?
Most of those are going to be managed type properties, and that's what you're looking at, is having to go through a HUD process and developing something along those lines. And that way there's some subsidy and some way to pay for that difference that somebody can't afford a full rent of $500 to $700, and you've got some way to help pay for that.
Is it unthinkable that one developer could take a dual path and do both types of projects? Or?
I don't know. That's a good question. Usually if it is that type of situation, it's going to be an apartment complex, not a housing development.
Right.
Because that way then you generate income and you get your money back out of it.
Yeah.
How do you get your money out of it the other way?
I mean, I see the upside. We want that revenue. We want to break apart or break this market loose and shake things up. But to not think about the 14 families on that wait list, I think is not what we should do.
Yeah. So on the last page, it talks about the construction of a subdivision and what those costs are. One of the things they have in there is for constructing a new home, they based it on $110 per square foot, which we don't believe is, yeah. We don't believe is an accurate number. But that was, again, it was just kind of just to give you some rough ideas for the IDC and for others that were involved in this group.
So where does this go next? Is this going to be utilized by the IDC?
Yes, they'll be utilized by the city and the county. This is something that we can use to get out in the public and say, here's why we need housing, here's what it shows, here's the benefits of it. So if we do something to encourage housing, if this board does something, this is why, and there's data to back that up.
Are there plans with the county, the city, IDC, everyone working together to come up with a plan?
Yep.
Well, and seeing the low vacant percentage might be a kind of a light bulb for potential developers to make sure they're looking at us. So.
Yep. That's it. That's all I got.
Anybody got anything else? Go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank
You all have a good night.
Thank you.